Sorry about that. My phone shut off again. Okay, we had a Shetland pony, which we kept in a little lean-to next to the garage. The pony got out once and wandered onto the runway at the airport. He was picked up by animal control, and we found we could no longer keep him there. The house was just on the outskirts of the country and too close to the residential area. Daddy kept bees for honey, and some of the neighbors complained because the bees would get into their swimming pools. We had to get rid of the bees also. When we moved into the house, the entire yard was dirt and weeds. Daddy wanted to plant a lawn, but not just any lawn. It had to be dichondra, which is not really a grass at all, but a tiny clover-like ground cover of the morning glory family. It required that there be no weed residue to contaminate delicate greenery. He plowed the ground with the rototiller. Then we kids, and I was the oldest at 15, raked for days and days to get all the crabgrass and the weeds out. To keep us from messing up the smoothed out yard with our footprints, we had to lie on a piece of plywood on our tummy to pull the weeds in front of us. The smaller kids helped sift the dirt from the grass roots also. Within a few weeks, our yard was level, green, and lush. I had a little tiny porch-like room where I slept, had no closet. The few clothes that I owned, I hung from a curtain rod along the window, above the window. Karen asked about my closet, and when I told her that was it, she was shocked. A short time after that, Karen gave me many of her clothes that she no longer wore. One of those was a pink dotted Swiss blouse with sleeves that were cut in a large circle. The hem of the sleeves fell at my elbow, but with the slightest breeze they would flare out like wings. I was pleased to have such nice clothes, and I no longer felt out of place at school. Karen and I worked on our biology project together, which by choice was an insect collection. We had the opportunity to stuff a real bird, but the thought of killing a bird did not appeal to me. Insects, though, had always been interesting. I had been exposed to the merits of resin when Daddy was building his boat. I decided that rather than put them into a box with pins, I would preserve the insects in clear resin. Karen and I set out to collect as many insects as were needed and labeled them with the proper scientific names. We mixed the resin with the catalyst, poured a thin layer into a glass cake pan, which I had borrowed from my sister-in-law, and placed all the insects into the soft plastic along with the paper descriptions and scientific names. When all of the insects were thus placed, we mixed the remainder of the resin and poured it over the first layer to create a completed section of plastic about 1 inch thick with the insects embedded inside. When the resin had set, we removed it from the cake pan. Actually, the cake pan removed itself. The resin became very hot as it set up, and suddenly the glass shattered on the kitchen counter. The resin was set. Our project was finished. We created this project at Karen's home, and the resin stunk up the whole house. We should have done it outside. Her mother was very patient with us. I was glad to have Karen as a friend. Our lifestyles were very different. I got a typo right there. Girls were still not allowed to wear jeans to school. Whenever there was a special activity going on, the student body petitioned for jeans to be allowed for the occasion. I was new to the school and unaware that this was the practice. In February, the school was having a Sadie Hawkins Day celebration. It was announced that the students could dress in appropriate dress for the occasion. The guys had grown beards for the holiday, but the girls had simply worn jeans. I did a little research on Sadie Hawkins and decided that to dress like one of the characters in Little Abner's cartoon strip. I shredded an old skirt around the bottom, put on one of my father's white shirts, topped this off with a very large necktie, put on an old straw hat, and went to school. When I arrived at school, I was dismayed to discover that out of the whole school, I was the only student who actually took the dress up this far. Once again, I was humiliated and embarrassed. At lunchtime, I walked the 3/4 of a mile home and changed into more appropriate clothing. While at McLean High School, I had my first legitimate employment opportunity. My financial hardship somehow came to the attention of the school office. I was called in to talk with a counselor. I didn't know why I had been summoned, and as he asked me about my situation at home, I felt sweat running down my sides. I listened to a proposition being presented to me. The school offered a work program where I could earn money while working in the cafeteria. I would be paid $1.25 an hour for 2 hours a day. I soon became a paid employee. The task assigned to me was the making and selling of bags of popcorn to the students. It was a job I enjoyed and allowed me to have more interaction with other students. Some of the boys would come and buy popcorn from me and invariably ask for more than I was supposed to provide. My dilemma was how to remain friendly and still be faithful to my employer's guidelines. McLean was also the source of one of the most embarrassing moments of my life. Some of the buildings were 2 stories high and had classrooms on both levels. On the lower floor, the girls' restrooms were on the west end of the building and the boys' on the east end. On the second floor, this arrangement was reversed, and the boys' restroom was on the west end and the girls' on the east. I was in English class on the first floor, and the pen I was using sprang a leak and saturated my hand with ink. Fortunately, it was near the end of class. I quickly gathered up my things as soon as the buzzer sounded. I dashed out the door, hurried down the hall, weaving in and out between students in the crowded hallway, and ducked into the restroom at the east end of the hall. I rushed to the sink, barely taking time to look around me, and was washing the ink from my hands. Suddenly, I noticed that things looked different, and a commotion at the door of the restroom caused me to look over my shoulder. In the open frame of the door stood half a dozen boys, wide-eyed and open-mouthed at seeing a girl in the restroom. At that moment, I could have died, but I didn't have time. I had to get to class. I made an excuse about washing the ink from my hands, and the boys stood timidly aside for me to exit. I darted out the door, red-faced, and hurried on to my next class. It was not too long after this that we moved, and I began attending Fowler High School. It was my 3rd high school. This time, I was glad for the move. I was glad that I did not have to worry about being the laughingstock of McLean High School, or wonder how many of the boys talked about me and the incident in the restroom to their friends each time they saw me. This time the move was a welcome one. The house we were living in was supposed to become ours by ownership, but in spite of the contract my parents had signed and the down payment they made, the man who sold it to them had swindled them. The house, it turned out, had been sold many times to other unsuspecting buyers. The completed contract was never made available, and the down payment was always lost. It is doubtful that the man even owned the house. We were on the move again. From there, we moved to a house on North Avenue.